You'll ate enormous applezara, key dairy chef's hat, he'll learn umpara, il raced a las whispers, kill later nut east, noon avuncular ill, declara.
Decil Paulus Eamus.
Decil Paulus Eamus.
Thrice. Send us, bright one, light one, hawhorn, quickening and womb fruit.
Send us, bright one, light one, hawhorn, quickening and womb fruit.
Thrice. Hoopsa, boy, oh boy, hoopsa!
Hoopsa, boy, hoopsa!
Hoopsa, boy, oh boy, hoopsa!
Likewise thrice.
Clara avuncular, whispers il umpara, il nuts dairy day, applezara, hat.
Shh! Oh, Citizen, you must be decided. It is very...
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm terribly sorry. Извините. Володя!
Что такое?
Вронский пришел. Он сказал, что в Петербурге революция.
Morose delectation. Quinus
Написано в
tunda.
газетах. Он говорит, что Куспи собирается открыть на
Что ты?
Да.
Это газета?
Да. Идем домой. Он ждет.
Он
Да.
Ты его?
Да.
Ты сама видела?
Да.
Иди назад и скажи ему, что я
And
прихожу
Veda
только с
transubstantiality. Or consubstantiality. But in no way substantiality. Lick-spittle capitalist lackeys of imperialism.
Pardon, Entschuldigung, scusi, excuse me. Je vous en prie.
A bit, prego! It's perfectly alright. A librarianess in Zurich only emerged from her niche when a lack of response to nicht reden, silence, obliged her to utter the plea. If you ever go across the sea to Ireland, it may be at the closing of your day. You can sit and watch the moon rise over Clonard and watch the sun go down or go away bay.
He was Irish, of course. Not actually from Limerick. He was a Dublin man. Joyce. Everybody knows that. couldn't have written the book without. There once was a young man from Dublin, Travelling. Used to have quite a knack for it, but there's little encouragement for that sort of thing in the consular service, I'm afraid. Not a great patron of poetry of the service, didn't push it, never made a feature of it. I mean, you would never say that a facility for rhyme and meter was the sine qua non for advancement in the consular service. Didn't discourage it, I'm not saying that. On the contrary, a most enlightened and cultivated body of men, fully sympathetic to all the arts, took no further than the occasion that brought us together, me and Joyce, into this room. Full support, theatrical event of the first water, great success, personal triumph of the demanding role of Ernest. Not Ernest, the other one. In at the top, have we got cucumber sandwiches for Lady Bracknell, notwithstanding the unfortunate consequences. Irish out! Not one to bear a grudge, however, not after all these years, and him dead in the cemetery up the hill, no hard feelings either side, unpleasant as it is to be dragged to the courts for a few francs, though it wasn't about the money, or the trousers for that matter, but be that as it may, all in all, truth be told, the encouragement of poetry writing was not the primary concern of the British consulate in Zurich in 1917, and now I've lost my knack for it. Too late to go back for it. A lesson to lag for it, but I digress. No apologies required. Constant digression being the saving grace of senile reminiscence. My memoirs, is it then? Life and Times, friend of the famous. Memories of James Joyce. James Joyce as I knew him. The James Joyce I knew. Through the course with James Joyce. What was he like? James Joyce, I am often asked. It is true that I knew him well at the height of his powers, his genius in full flood during the making of Ulysses, before publication and fame turned him into a public monument for pilgrim cameras, more often than not in a velvet smoking jacket of none known colour, photography being in those days a black and white affair, probably real blue, if not a percolate purple, and sniffing a bunch of sultry violets that positively defied development. Don't go on. Do it in my head. Caviar for the general public. Now then. Memories of James Joyce. It's coming. To those of us who knew him, Joyce's genius was never in doubt. To be in his presence was to be aware of an amazing intellect bent on shaping itself into the permanent form of its own monument. The book the world now knows as Ulysses. Though at that time we were still calling it, I hope my memory serves, by its original title, Elasticated Bloomers. A prudish, prudent man, Joyce, and nowhere profligate or vulgar, and yet convivial without being spendthrift, yet still without primness toward hard currency in all its transmutable and transferable forms and denominations, of which, however, he demanded only a sufficiency from the world at large, exhibiting a monkish unconcern for worldly and bodily comforts, without, at the same time, shutting himself off from the richness of human society, whose temptations, on the other hand, he met with an ascetic disregard, tempered only by sudden and catastrophic aberrations. In short, a complex personality, an enigma, a contradictory spokesman for the truth, an obsessive litigant, and yet an essentially private man who wished for his total indifference to public notice to be universally recognized. In short, a liar and a hypocrite, a tight-fisted, sponging, fornicating drunk, not worth the paper. That's that bit done. Further recollections of a consular official in whitest Switzerland. The ups and downs of consular life in Zurich during the Great War. A sketch, 'Twas in the bustling metropolis of swiftly gliding trams and grey stone banking houses, of cosmopolitan restaurants on the great stone banks of the swiftly gliding snot green mucus mutandis Lemot River, of jeweled escapements and refugees of all kinds, e.g. Lenin. There's a point. Lenin, as I knew him. The Lenin I knew. Halfway to the Finland station with V.I. Lenin. A sketch. I well remember the first time I met Lenin, or as he was known on his library ticket, Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov. To be in his presence was to be aware of a complex personality, enigmatic, magnetic, but not, I think, astigmatic. His piercing brown, if memory serves, eyes giving no hint of it. An essentially simple man, and yet an intellectual theoretician, bent, as I was already aware, on the seemingly impossible task of reshaping the civilized world into a federation of standing committees of workers' deputies. As I shook the hand of this dynamic, gnomic, and yet not, I think, anemic stranger who, with his fine head of blonde hair falling over his forehead, gave him the clean-shaven look of a Scandinavian seafaring. Hello, hello. Got my wrong chap, as in. Take no notice. All come out in the wash. That's the art of it. Fact of the matter, who, for without benefit of historical perspective and the photograph album of red square packed to the corner stickers with camaraderie, and now for our main speaker, bold and bearded and three-piece suit, good God, if it isn't Ulyanov. Knew him well, always sat between the window and economics A through K, etc., well. Take away all that, and who was he to Radek, or Radek to him, or he to Martov, or Martinov, or Plekhanov, or he to Ulyanov, for that matter? In Zurich, in 1917, Cafe conspirators, so what? Snowballs in hell. Snowballs at all. Lenin had only one chance in a million. Remember that time they had the meeting? Social Democrats for Civil War in Europe. Total attendance, 4. Ulyanov. Mrs. Ulyanov. Zinoviev and a police spy. And now they want to know, what was he like? What was he like, Lenin? I am often asked. To those of us who knew him, Lenin's greatness was never in doubt. So, why don't you put a pound on him? You'll be a millionaire. Like that chap who bet 6 pence against the Titanic. No. Truth of the matter, would have thought big oaks in my corner room at number 14 Spiegelgasse. Here's a thing. 2 revolutions formed on the same street, face to face in Spiegelgasse, a street of revolution. A sketch. Meet by the sadly sliding, chagrined Lemot River, strike west and immediately find ourselves soaking wet. Strike east and immediately find ourselves in the old town, having left behind that banking, bouncing metropolis of trampolines and chronometry of all kinds, for here in the riddled maze of alleyways time has stopped. And by the way, you'd never believe a Swiss red light district, pornographic thread workshops, vice dens. Get a grip on yourself. Sorry. Second right, third left, Spiegelgasse. Narrow, cobbled, high old houses in a solid rank. Number 14, the house of the narrow cobbler himself. Camera his name, Lenin his tenant, and across the way, at number 1, the Mayarai Bar, crucible of anti-art, cradle of Dada. Who? What? What's it say, Dada? You remember Dada, historical halfway house twixt futurism and surrealism, between Marinetti and Andre Breton, between the before the war to end all war years and the between the war years. Dada! Down with logic, reason, causality, coherence, proportion, tradition, sense, and consequence. My art belongs to Dada, 'cause Dada treats me so. Well then, Memories of Dada by a consular friend of the famous and old Zurich. A sketch. What did it do in the Great War, Dada? I am often asked. How did it begin? Where did it? When? What was it? Who named it? And why? Dada. These are just some of the questions that continue to baffle Dadaists the world over. To those of us who lived through it, Dada was, topographically speaking, the high point of Western European culture. I well remember, as though it were yesteryear, how Hugo Ball, or was it Hans Up? Yes, Picabia, was it? Yes, no, Zara, yes! Zara wrote his name in the snow with his walking stick and said, I think I'll call it the Alps. Oh, the yes-nos of yesteryear was only age done gone. Over the hills and far away, the 6-pounders pounding in howitzer loud, no louder than the soft thud of snow falling off the roof. Heaven, to be picked up, plucked out, blessed by the blood of a negligible wound and released into the folds of snow-covered hills. Oh, Switzerland, unfurled like a white flag, Pacific, civilian Switzerland. The miraculous neutrality of it, the non-combatant impartiality of it, the non-aggression pacts of it, the International Red Cross of it. Entente to the left, détente to the right, into the valley of the invalid, blundered and wandered myself when young, car of the consulate. First name Henry. That much is beyond dispute. I'm mentioned in the books. For the rest, I'd be willing to enter into discussion, but not, if you don't mind, correspondence on matters of detail and chronology. I stand open to correction on all points, except for my height, which can't be too far off, and the success of my performance, which I remember clearly in the demanding role of Ernest. Not Ernest, the other one. That, and my sense of sheer relief at having arrived at a state of rest, namely Switzerland, the still center of the wheel of war. That's really the thing. The first thing to grasp about Switzerland is that there is no war here. Even when there is war everywhere else, there is no war in Switzerland.
Yes, sir.
It is this complete absence of bellicosity, coupled with an ostentatious punctuality of public clocks, that gives the place its reassuring air of permanence. Switzerland, one instinctively feels, will not go away, nor will it turn into somewhere else. You have no doubt had allusions to the beneficial quality of the Swiss air, Bennett. The quality referred to is permanence.
Yes, sir.
Desperate men who have heard the clock strike 13 in Alsace and Trieste and Serbia and Montenegro, who felt the ground shift beneath them in Estonia, Austro-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire, arrive in Switzerland and find that after a few deep breaths, the ringing and buzzing in their ears has regulated itself into a soothing tick-tock, and that the ground beneath their feet, while invariably sloping, is as steady as an oak. Tonight, I incline to the theatre. Get me out the straight-cut trousers with the blue satin stripe and the silk cutaway. I'll wear the opal studs.
Yes, sir. I've put the newspapers and telegrams on the sideboard, sir.
Is there anything of interest?
The Neue Zürcher Zeitung and the Zürcher Post announced respectively an important Allied and German victory, both sides gaining ground after inflicting heavy casualties on the other, with little loss to itself.
Ah, yes. The war. Poor devils. I wish I could get back to the trenches. To my comrades in arms, the wonderful spirit out there in the mud and wire, the brave days and fearful nights, bliss it was to see the dawn. To be alive was very heaven. Never in the whole history of human conflict was there anything to match the carnage, God's blood, the shot and shell, graveyard stench, Christ Jesus deserted by simpletons, they damn us to hell, all the blood of us quick, now, get me out! I think to match the carnation, ox blood, shot, silk cravat, starched, creased just so, asserted by a simple Plymouth Damask lapel, and the brow, no, biscuit, no, get me out the straight-cut trousers with the blue satin stripe and the silk cutaway. I'll wear the opal stars.
Yes, sir. I've put the newspapers and telegrams on the sideboard, sir.
Is there anything of interest?
The war continues to dominate the newspapers, sir.
Ah, yes. The war. Always the war. I was in Savile Row when I heard the news, talking to the head carter at Druid and Madge, and a houndstooth check slightly flared behind the knee, quite unusual. Old Druid, or Madge, came in and told me. Never trusted the Hun, I remarked. Bosh, he replied, and I, at the time unfamiliar with the appellation, turned on my heel and walked into Trimerton Punch, ordered a complete suit of Harris Knickerbockers with hecking vents. By the time they were ready, I was in France. Great days. Dawn breaking over no man's land. Dewdrops glistening on the poppies in the early morning sun. Or quiet on the western front. Tickety-boo, tickety-boo, tickety-boo.
A gentleman called, sir. He did not wait.
What did he want?
He did not vouchsafe his business, sir. He left his card.
Tristan Zara. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Did he have a stutter?
He spoke French with a Romanian accent and wore a monocle.
He is obviously trying to pass himself off as a spy. It is a form of vanity widely indulged in Zurich during the European War, I believe, and adds greatly to the inconveniences caused by the crowds of real spies who conspire to fill the Odeon and the Terrace, and make it almost impossible to get a table at either.
I have seen him with a group of friends at the terrace, sir. Whether they were conspirators, I could not, of course, tell.
To masquerade as a conspirator, or at any rate to speak French with a Romanian accent and wear a monocle, is at least as wicked as to be one. In fact, rather more wicked, since it gives a dishonest impression of perfidy, and moreover, makes the overcrowding in the cafes gratuitous, being neither the result of genuine intrigue nor bona fide treachery. Was it not, after all, La Rochefoucauld who had it in his maxims that in Zurich, in spring, in wartime, a gentleman is hard put to find a vacant seat for all the spurious spies, peeping on police spies, spying on spies, I encounter spies, what a bloody country, even the cheese has got holes in it!
Yes, sir. With the newspapers and telegrams on the sideboard, sir.
Is there anything of interest?
There's a revolution in Russia, sir.
Really? What sort of revolution?
A social revolution, sir.
A social revolution? Unaccompanied women smoking at the opera, that sort of thing.
Not precisely that, sir. It is more in the nature of a revolution of classes contraposed by the vociferous disequilibrium of Russian society.
What do you mean, classes?
Masters and servants, as it were, sir.
Oh. Masters and servants. Classes.
There have been scenes of violence.
I see. Well, I'm not in the least bit surprised, Bennett. I didn't wish to appear wise after the event, but anyone with half an acquaintance with Russian society could see that the day was not far off before the exploited class, disillusioned by the neglect of its interests, alarmed by the falling value of the ruble, and above all, goaded beyond endurance by the insolent rapacity of its servants, should turn upon those butlers, footmen, cooks, and valets. Parenthetically, Bennett, I see from your book that on Thursday night when Mr. Zara was dining with me, 8 bottles of champagne ended as having been consumed. I have had previous occasion to speak to you of the virtues of moderation, Bennett. This time I will only say, remember Russia.
Yes, sir. The newspapers and telegrams on the sideboard, sir.
Is there anything of interest?
The Tsar now abdicates, sir. There is a provisional government headed by Prince Lvov with the socialist Kerensky as Minister of Justice. The inclusion of Kerensky is calculated to recommend the government to a broad base of the common people, but effective authority has already been challenged by a committee of workers' deputies, or Soviet, which, for the moment, has united all shades of socialist opinion.
I see.
However, there is no immediate prospect of the socialists seizing power, for the revolution is regarded by them as fulfillment of Karl Marx's prophecy of a bourgeois capitalist era in Russia's progress towards socialism.
I'm thinking about Marx.
According to Marx, there is no way to accomplish a leap from autocracy to socialism, while the ultimate triumph of socialism is inevitable, being the end of the process of dialectical materialism. It must be preceded by a bourgeois capitalist stage of development.
Are you
When
done?
the time is right, and not before, there will be further revolution led by the organized industrial workers, or proletariat. Thus, it is the duty of the Russian Marxists to welcome the present bourgeois revolution, even though it might take several generations to get through. As things stand, therefore, if one can be certain of anything, it is that Russia is set fair to be a parliamentary democracy on the British model.
Newspapers or coded telegram?
General rumor put about Zurich by the crowds of spies, counter-spies, artists, and riffraff of all kind. Mr. Zara called, sir. He did not wait.
I'm not sure that I approve of your taking up of this modish novelty of free association, Bennett.
I'm sorry, sir, it's only Mr. Zara being an artist.
I will not have you passing moral judgments on my friends. If Mr. Zara is an artist, that is his misfortune.
Yes, sir. I have put the newspapers and telegrams on the sideboard, sir.
Is there anything of interest?
In St. Petersburg, the provisional government has declared its intentions to carry on the war. However, the Committee of Workers' Deputies, or Soviet, consider the war to be nothing more than a bourgeois imperialist adventure carried on at the expense of workers of both sides. To cooperate in this adventure is to be stigmatized in a novel phrase, which seems to translate as a lick-spittle capitalist lackey. Unnecessarily offensive in my views.
I'm not sure I'm much interested in your views, Bennett.
They're not particularly interesting, sir. However, there is a more extreme position put forward by the Bolshevik Party. The Bolshevik line is that some unspecified but unique property of the Russian situation, unforeseen by Marx, has caused for the bourgeois capitalist era of Russian history to be compressed into the last few days, and that the time for the proletarian revolution is now ripe. But the Bolsheviks are a small minority in the Soviet, and their leader, Vladimir Leonov, also known as Lenin, has been exiled since the abortive 1905 revolution, and is now in fact living in Zurich.
Naturally.
Yes, sir. If I may quote La Rochefoucauld, quel pain sanguinaire mon fromage est plein de trous. Lenin is desperately trying to return to Russia, but naturally the Allies will not allow him free passage. Since Lenin is almost alone in proclaiming the Bolshevik orthodoxy, which is indeed his own creation, his views at present count for nothing in St. Petersburg. A betting man will have odds of about 1,000,000 to 1 against Lenin's views prevailing. But it is suggested you take all steps to ascertain his plans.
I ascertain Lenin's plans.
Telegram from the minister.
1,000,000 to 1.
I'd put a pound on him, sir.
You know him?
I do, sir. And if any doubt remains, the British Secret Service assures us that the man to watch is Kerensky.
Bennett seems to be showing alarming signs of irony. I've always found that irony among the lower orders is the first sign of an awakening social consciousness. It remains to be seen whether it will grow into an armed seizure of the means of production, distribution, and exchange, or spend itself in leftist journalism.
Mr. Zara.
How are you, my dear Tristan? What brings you here?
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. What else? Eating as usual, I see, Henry. Hello, hello. What is the teapots, etc.? Somebody coming? It is Gwendolyn, I hope. I love her, Henry. I've come by train expressly to propose marriage.
Miss Gwendolyn and Mr. Joyce.
Top of the morning, James Joyce. I hope you'll allow me to voice my regrets in advance for coming on the off chance. Jesus, I hadn't much choice.
Sorry, would you say that again?
God, I'd better explain. I'm told that you are
Miss Carr.
Mr. Zara.
Jesus, Joyce is the name.
Oh, I'm sorry, how terribly rude. Henry, Mr. Joyce.
How do you do?
Delighted.
Good day.
I just wanted to say how sorry I am to intrude.
Tell me, are you some kind of a poet?
You know my work?
No, it's something about your delivery. Can't quite...
Irish.
From Limerick.
No Dublin. Don't tell me you know.
He's a poor writer.
Aha! A fine writer who writes caviar. For the general, hence poor.
Wants to touch you for sure.
I'm addressing my friend, Mr.
Ah.
Mr. Zara writes poetry and sculpts, with quite unexpected results. I'm told he recites, and on Saturday nights, does all kinds of things for adults.
I don't really think Mr. Carr is interested much in Dada.
We say it like Dada.
The fact is, I'm rather hard up.
Yes, I'm told that you are. If it's money you want, I'm afraid.
Oh, Henry, he's managing a play! And Mr. Joyce thought with your official support.
And a couple of pounds till I'm paid.
I don't see why not. For my part, HMG is considered pro-art.
Consider me auntie.
Consider your auntie.
A pound would do for a start.
The Bosch brought culture aplenty. For Swiss, what's the word?
Cognoscenti.
It's worth 50 tanks.
Or 25 francs.
No, British culture.
I'll take 20.
Culture and reason.
15?
They give us the mincing machine.
That's awfully profound.
Could you lend me a pound?
All literature is obscene. The classics, traditions, vomit on it.
Oh.
Beethoven, Mozart, I spit on it.
Oh.
Everything's chance.
Consider your aunt.
Causality, logic, I
Awfully profound.
Could you lend me a pound?
I thought he was going to say shit on it.
By Jove, I've got it! Iolanthe!
Obscene.
Is it?
Avanti, guten tag, adios.
Au revoir.
Vamonos.
Give my regards to your auntie.
rhymer I met used a system he based on roulette. His reliance on chance was a definite advance, and yet, an impromptu poet of Hibernia rhymed himself into a hernia. He became quite adept at the practice, except for occasional anticlimaxes. When I want to leave things in the air, I say, "Excuse me, I've got to repair to my book about Bloom," and I just leave the room.
Well, let us presume Zurich by one who was there.
Mr. Zara.
How are you, my dear Tristan? What brings you here?
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. What else should bring anyone anywhere? Eating and drinking as usual, I see, Henry. I have often observed that stoical principles are more easily borne by those of Epicurean habits.
I believe it is done to drink a glass of hock and seltzer before luncheon, and it is well done to drink it well before luncheon. I took to drinking hock and seltzer for my nerves at a time when nerves were fashionable in good society. This season it is trench foot, but I drink it regardless because I feel much better after it.
You might have felt much better anyway.
No. Post hoc, propter hoc.
But, my dear Henry, causality is no longer fashionable owing to the war.
How illogical, since the war itself had causes. I forget what they were, but it was in all the papers at the time. Something about brave little Belgium, was it?
Was it? I thought it was Serbia.
Brave little Serbia. No, I don't think so. The newspapers would never risk calling the British public to arms without a proper regard for succinct alliteration.
Oh, what nonsense you talk.
It may be nonsense, but at least it's clever nonsense.
I am sick of cleverness. In point of fact, everything is chance.
That sounds awfully clever. What does it mean?
It means, my dear Henry, that the causes we know everything about depend on causes we know very little about, which depend on causes we know absolutely nothing about. And it is the duty of the artist to jeer and howl and belch at the delusion that infinite generations of real effects can be inferred from the gross expression of apparent cause.
It is the duty of the artist to beautify existence.
Dada. Dada, dada, dada. Dada, dada, dada. Dada, 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 dada. Da, 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 dada. Dada, dada. Dada, dada, dada. Dada, dada. Dada. Da 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 Dada, dada.
Oh, what nonsense you talk.
It may be nonsense, but at least it's not clever nonsense. Cleverness has been exploded, along with so much else, by the war.
You forget that I was there, in the mud and blood of a foreign field, unmatched by anything in the whole history of human carnage. Ruined several pairs of trousers. No one who has not been in the trenches can have the faintest conception of the horror of it. I'd hardly set foot in France before I sank in up to my knees in a pair of twill jodhpurs with pigskin straps hand-stitched by Imogen Hawks. And so it went on. The 16-ounce serge, the heavy worsteds, the silk flannel mixture, till I was invalided out with a bullet through the calf. Of an irreplaceable lamb's wool, dyed khaki in the yard to my own specification. I tell you, there is nothing in Switzerland to compare with it.
Oh, come now, Henry, your trousers always look...
I mean with trench warfare.
Well, I dare say, Henry, but you could have spent the time here in Switzerland as an artist.
My dear Tristan, to be an artist at all is like living in Switzerland during a world war. To be an artist in Zurich in 1917 implies a degree of self-absorption which would have glazed over the eyes of Narcissus. When I sent round to Hamish and Rudge for their military pattern book, I was responding to feelings of patriotism, of duty, to my love of freedom, my hatred of tyranny, and my sense of oneness with the underdog. I mean, in general, I never particularly cared for the Belgians as such. And besides, I couldn't be an artist anywhere. I can do none of the things by which is meant art.
Doing the things by which is meant art is no longer considered the proper concern of the artist. In fact, it is frowned upon. Nowadays, an artist is someone who makes art mean the things he does. A man may be an artist by exhibiting his hindquarters. He may be a poet by drawing words out of a hat.
But that is simply to change the meaning of the word art.
I see I have made myself clear.
Then you're not actually an artist at all.
On the contrary, I have just told you that I am.
But that does not make you an artist. An artist is someone who is gifted in such a way that enables them to do something more or less well, which can only be done badly, or not at all, by someone who is not thus gifted. If there is any point in using language at all, is that a word is taken to stand for a particular fact or idea, and not for other facts or ideas. I might claim to be able to fly. Lo, I say, I am flying. But you're not actually propelling yourself about while suspended in the air, someone may point out. I know, I reply. That is no longer considered the proper concern of people who can fly. In fact, it is frowned upon. Nowadays, a flyer never leaves the ground and wouldn't know how. I see, says my somewhat baffled interlocutor. Then, when you say you can fly, you are using the word in a purely private sense. I see I have made myself clear. Then, says this chap in some relief, you cannot actually fly after all. On the contrary, I say, I have just told you that I can. Don't you see, my dear Tristan, you are asking me to accept that the word art means whatever you wish it to mean, but I do not accept it.
Why not? You do exactly the same thing with words like patriotism, duty, love, freedom, king and country, brave little Belgium, saucy little Serbia.
You're insulting my comrades in arms, many of whom died on the field of honor.
And honor. All the traditional sophistries of waging wars of expansion and self-interest set to patriotic hymns. Music is corrupted, language conscripted, words are taken to stand for their opposites. That is why anti-art is the art of our time.
The nerve of it! Wars are fought to make the world safe for artists. It is never quite put in those terms, but is a useful way of grasping what civilized ideas are all about. The easiest way of knowing whether good has triumphed over evil is to examine the freedom of the artist, the ingratitude of artists, indeed their hostility, not to mention the loss of nerve and failure of talent which accounts for modern art, merely demonstrate the freedom of the artist to be ungrateful, hostile, self-centered, and talentless, for which freedom I went to war.
Wars are fought for oil wells and coaling stations, for control of the Dardanelles or the Suez Canal, for colonial pickings to buy cheap in and conquered markets to sell deer in. War is capitalism with the gloves off, and many who go to war know it, but they go to war anyway because they don't want to be a hero. It takes courage to sit down and be counted, but how much better it is to live bravely in Switzerland than to die cravenly in France, quite apart from what it does to one's trousers.
My God. You little Romanian wog! You bloody dago! You jumped up phrase-making smart alecky art intellectual Balkan turd! Think you know it all? While we poor dupes think we're fighting for ideals, you've got a profound understanding of what's really going on underneath. You've got a phrase for it, you pedant! You think your phrase is the true sum of each man's living of each day? Capitalism with the gloves off! The big ass experience of a wire-cutting party caught in a crossfire in no man's land. It's all rage in Zurich, you slug! What's really going on? I went to war because it was my duty, because my country needed me, and that's patriotism. I went to war because I believe that those poor little Belgians and incompetent frogs have the right to be defended from German militarism, and that's love of freedom. That's how things are underneath, and I won't be told by some yellow-bellied Bolshevik that I ended up in the trenches because I was a prophet in ball bearings.
Quite right! You ended up in the trenches because on the 28th of June, 1900, the heir to the throne of Austro-Hungary married beneath him and found that the wife he loved was not allowed to sit next to him on royal occasions except when he was performing in his military capacity as Inspector General of the Austro-Hungarian Army, in which capacity he therefore decided to inspect the army in Bosnia, so at least on their wedding anniversary, the 28th of June, 1914, they may ride side by side in an open carriage through the streets of Sarajevo. Or to put it another way,
we're here because we're here, because we're here, because we're here. We're here because we're here, because we're here, because we're here. Great day! Dawn breaking over no man's land. Dewdrops glistening on the poppies in the early morning sun. The trenches stirring to life. Good morning, Corporal. All quiet on the Western Front. Tickety-boo, sir. Carry on. Wonderful spirit out there in the trenches. Never in the whole history of human conflict was there anything to match the courage, the comradeship, the warmth, the cold, the mud, the stench, fear, folly, Christ, Jesu. But for this blessed leg, I never thought to be picked out, plucked out, blessed by the blood of a blighty wound and released into the folds of snow-white feather beds. Heaven, unfurled like a white flag, Pacific, civilian heaven. The mystical sophisticality of it, the entente cordiality of it, the Jesus Christ. I'm out of it. Into the valley of the invalided, car of the consulate. And what brings you here, my dear Tristan?
Pleasure, pleasure. What else would bring anyone anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, Henry.
I believe it is customary in good society to take a cucumber sandwich at 5 o'clock. And where have you been since last Thursday?
In the public library.
What on earth were you doing there?
That's just what I kept asking myself.
And what was the reply?
Cecily does not approve of garrulity in the reference section.
Who is Cecily? And is she as pretty and well-bred as she sounds? Cecily is a name well thought of at fashionable christenings.
Cecily is a librarianess. I say, do you know someone called Joyce?
Joyce is a name which can only expose a child to comment around the font.
No. Mr. Joyce. Irish writer, mainly of limericks. Christened James Augustine, though registered due to a clerical error as James Augusta. A little known fact.
Certainly I do not know it, but then I've never taken an interest in Irish affairs. In fashionable society, it would be considered a sign of incipient vulgarity with radical undertones.
The war caught Joyce and his wife in Trieste, in Austro-Hungary. They got into Switzerland and settled in Zurich. He lives in Universitätsstraße and can often be seen round about, in the library and the cafes, wearing, for example, a blue pinstripe jacket with gray herringbone trousers, or a brown Donegal jacket with blue pinstripe trousers, or a gray herringbone jacket with brown Donegal trousers. All the mismatched halves of sundry sundered Sunday suits, sorts languid into hands of contract bridge. His limericks are said to be more interesting, though hardly likely to start a revolution. I say, do you know someone called Julian?
I'm finding this conversation extremely hard to follow. And besides, you still have not told me what you were doing at the public library. I had no idea poets nowadays were interested in literature. Or is it that your interest is in Cecily?
Oh, good heavens, no. Cecily is rather pretty and well-bred, as you surmise. But her views on poetry are very old-fashioned, and her knowledge of the poets, as indeed of everything else, is eccentric, being based on alphabetical precedent. She's working her way along the shelves. She has read Allingham, Annan, Arnold, Belloc, Blake, both Brownings, Byron, and so on, up to, I believe, G.
Who is Allingham?
Up the airy mountain, down the rushy glen, we daren't go hunting for fear of little men. Cecily would regard any poem that came out of a hat with the gravest suspicion. Hello, Why the extra cup? Why the cucumber sandwiches? Who's coming to tea?
It is merely set for Gwendolyn. She usually returns at about this hour.
How perfectly delightful, and, to be honest, not unexpected. I am in love with Gwendolyn and have come expressly to propose to her.
Well, that is a surprise.
Surely not, Henry. I have made my feelings for Gwendolyn quite plain.
Of course you have, my dear fellow. My surprise merely stems from the fact that you must surely have met Gwendolyn at the public library, for she has left here every morning this week saying that is where she is going, and Gwendolyn is a scrupulously truthful girl. In fact, as an elder brother, I have had to speak to her of it. Unrelieved truthfulness can give a young girl a reputation for insincerity. I have known plain girls with nothing to hide captivate the London season purely by discriminate mendacity.
I can assure you, Gwendolyn has been at the public library. But I have had to admire her from afar, all the way from economics to foreign literature.
I had no idea Gwendolyn knew any foreign languages, and I'm not sure that I approve. It's the sort of thing which can only broaden a girl's mind.
Well, in this library, foreign literature includes English.
What a novel arrangement. Is any reason given?
The point is, Henry, I can't get to speak to her alone.
Ah, yes, her chaperone.
Chaperone.
Yes. You don't imagine I let my sister go unchaperoned in a city largely frequented by foreigners. Gwendolyn has been a friend in Zurich. I have not met her, but Gwendolyn assures me that they are continuously in each other's company, and from a description which I have elicited by discreet questioning, she cannot be but a wholesome and restraining influence, being practically middle-aged, plainly dressed, bespectacled, and answering to the name of Joyce. Oh, good heavens. Is he after her money?
Only in derisory installments. He claims to be writing a novel and has made a disciple out of Gwendolyn. She transcribes for him, looks things up in works of reference, and so on. The poor girl is so innocent. She has not stopped to wonder what possible book could be derived from reference to Homer's Odyssey and the Dublin Street Directory for 1904.
Homer's Odyssey and the Dublin Street Directory?
For 1904!
I admit it's an unusual combination of sources, but not wholly without possibilities. Anyway, there's no need to behave as if you were married to her already. You're not married to her already, and I don't think you ever will be.
Why on earth do you say that?
Well, in the first place, girls never marry Romanians, and in the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear fellow, Gwendolyn is my sister, and before I allow you to marry her, you should have to clear up this whole question of Jack.
Jack. What on earth do you mean? What do you mean, Henry, by Jack? I do not know anyone of the name of Jack.
You left this here the last time you died.
Do you mean to tell me you have had my library ticket this whole time? Had to pay a small fine in replacing it.
That was extravagant of you, since the ticket does not belong to you. It is made out in the name of Mr. Jack Zara, and your name isn't Jack. It's Tristan.
No, it isn't. It's Jack.
You have always told me it was Tristan. I have introduced you to everyone as Tristan. You answer to the name of Tristan. Your notoriety at the Myra Bar is firmly associated with the name Tristan. It is perfectly absurd saying your name isn't Tristan.
My name is Tristan in the Myri Bar and Jack in the library, and that ticket was issued in the library.
To write, or at any rate to draw words out of a hat, under one name and appear at the public library under another is an understandable precaution, but I cannot believe that is the whole explanation.
My dear Henry, the explanation is perfectly simple. One day last year, not long after our triumph at the Myri Bar for a noise concert of siren, rattle, and fire extinguisher, a bunch of the boys were sinking a beer at the Café Zumabna. Myself, Hans Arp, Hugo Ball, Macabia. Arp was, as usual, inserting a warm croissant into his nose. I was quietly improving a Shakespeare sonnet with a pair of scissors.
Which one?
I believe it was the 18th, the one beginning Vergleichen soll ich dich dem Sommertag, da du bei lieblicher weit milde bist.
But surely in German it's hardly worth the trouble.
Oh, completely pointless. If it weren't, it wouldn't be Dada. Well, who should come along but Juliana, also known as Lenin, with a group of Zimmerwaldists.
That sounds like the last word in revolutionary socialism.
It is. At Zimmerwald in 1915, we called upon the workers of the world to oppose the war.
We?
Well, I dined with them, and was doing so on this occasion when someone at the bar piano began to play a Beethoven sonata. Lennon went completely to pieces, wept like a child. When he dried his eyes, he lashed into the Dadaists. Decadent nihilists, flogging too good for them, and so on. Fortunately, the name Zara meant nothing to him, but a few days later I met up with him in the public library and he introduced me to Cecily. Zara, she said. Not the Dadaist, I hope. I could feel Lenin's eyes upon me. My younger brother Tristan, I replied. Most unfortunate, terrible blow to the family. When I was filling out my application form, for some reason, the first name I thought of was Jack. It really has turned out rather well.
Cecily knows Lenin, does she?
Oh, yes, he has made a disciple out of Cecily. She is helping him with his book on imperialism.
Did you say the reference section?
They agree on everything, including art. As a Dadaist, I am a natural enemy of bourgeois art, and a natural ally of the political left. But the odd thing about revolution is that the further left you go politically, the more bourgeois they like their art.
There's nothing odd about that. Revolution in art is in no way connected with class revolution. Artists are members of a privileged class. Art is absurdly overrated by artists, which is understandable, but it's strange that it's also absurdly overrated by everyone else.
Because man cannot live by bread alone.
Yes, he can. It's art he can't live on. When I was at school, on certain afternoons, we all had to do what was called labor. Weeding, sweeping, sawing logs for the boiler room, that sort of thing. But if you had a chit from matron, you were let off to spend the afternoon messing about in the art room. Labor or art. And you got a chit for life? Where did you get it? What is an artist? For every 1,000 people, there's 900 doing the work, 90 doing well, 9 doing good, and one lucky bastard is the artist.
Yes, by Christ! And when you look at the drawings he made on the walls of the cave, and the fingernail patterns he one day pressed into the clay of the cooking pot, then you say, my God, I am of these people. It was not the hunters and the warriors that put you on the first rung of the ladder of consecutive thought, and a rather unusual flare in your poncy trousers.
Oh, yes, it was. The warrior decorated the pot, the hunter scored the antelope on the wall, and the artist came home with the kill. All of a piece. The idea of the artist as a special kind of human being is art's greatest achievement, and it's a fake!
By God, you bloody English Philistine, you ignorant, smart-arse, bogus bourgeois Anglo-Saxon prick! When the strongest began to fight for the tribe and the fastest began to hunt, it was the artist who became the priest guardian of the magic that conjured the intelligence out of the appetites. Without him, man would be a coffee mill. Eat, grind, shit. Hunt, eat, fight, grind, saw the logs, shit. The difference between being a man and being a coffee mill is art. But that difference has become smaller and smaller and smaller. Art created patrons and was corrupted. It began to celebrate the ambitions and acquisitions of the paymaster. The artist has negated himself. Paint, eat, sculpt, grind, write, shit. Without art, man was a coffee mill. But with art, man is a coffee mill. That is the message of Dada. Dada! 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 Dada!
Miss Gwendolyn, Mr. George.
Morning. My name is James Drudge.
James Augusta.
Is that a shot in the dark?
Not at all. I'm a student of footnotes to expatriate Irish literature.
You know my work?
No, only your name.
Miss Carr?
Mr. Zara.
But something about you suggests Limerick.
No, Dublin. Don't tell me you know it.
Only from the guidebook, and I gather you were in the process of revising that.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, how terribly rude. Henry, Mr. Joyce?
How do you do?
Delighted.
Good day.
just wanted to say,
Do you know Mr. Zara the poet?
by sight and by reputation, but I am a martyr to glaucoma and inflation. Recently, as I was walking down the Bahnhofstrasse, my eye was caught by a gallery showcase, and I was made almost insensible with pain.
Mr. Joyce has written a poem about it. It is something you two have in common.
Hardly. Mr. Zara's disability is monocular and, by rumor, affected, whereas I have certificates for conjunctivitis, iritis, and synechia, and am something of an international eyesore.
I mean poetry. I was thinking of your poem Bahnhofstrasse, beginning, "The eyes that mock me sign the way, whereto I pass at eve of day, grey way whose violet signals are the trysting and the twining star."
For your masterpiece, I have great expectorations.
Oh.
For you, I would evacuate a monument. Art for art's sake, I am likewise defecated.
Dedicated.
I am a foreigner.
So am I!
But it is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. I have a good ear. Would you not agree, Mr. Zara?
It is the most perfect thing about you, Miss Carr.
Oh, I should hope not. That would leave no room for development.
But have you not read any of Mr. Zara's poems?
To my shame, I've not. But perhaps the shame is yours, Mr. Zara.
I accept it, but the matter can be easily put right, and at once.
Oh, Mr. Zara.
And what about you, Doris?
Joyce.
Joyce, yes.
Not as a poet that I come to see you, sir, but as the business manager of the English Players, a theatrical troupe.
The business manager.
Yes.
Well, if it's money you want, I'm afraid.
Oh, Henry, he's mounting a play. And Mr. Joyce thought with your official support.
Perhaps I'd better explain. It seems, sir, that my name is in bad odor among the British community in Zurich. Whether it is my occasional contributions to the neutralist press, or whether it is my version of Mr. Dooley, beginning, "Who is the man when all the gallant nations run to war, goes home to eat his dinner by the very first cable car, and as he eats his cantaloupe, contorts himself with mirth to read the blatant bulletins of the rulers of the earth." And, continuing, "Who is the furious man who declined to go to church since Pope and priest and parson left the poor man in the lurch and taught their flock the only way to save all human souls was piercing human bodies through with dumb bullet holes?" And proceeding to, "Who is the tranquil gentleman who won't salute the state, or serve Nebuchadnezzar, or proletariate, but thinks that every son of man has quite enough to do to paddle down the stream of life, his personal canoe?" By way of, who is the meek philosopher who doesn't care a damn about the yellow peril or the problem of Siam, and disbelieves that British tar is water from life's fount, and will not gulp the gospel of the John on the Mount? And ending, "It's Mr. Dooley, Mr. Dooley, the wisest wine our country ever knew, for you're a bamble, you shambles, sighs Mr. Dooley, Cooley, or some other cause altogether. The impression remains on our part both sides with equal indifference.
And you don't.
Only as an artist. As an artist, naturally, I attach no importance to the swings and roundabouts of political history. But it is not as an artist that I come to see you, sir, but as James A. Joyce. I'm an Irishman, and the proudest boast of an Irishman is I paid back my way.
So it is money.
A couple pounds would be welcome, certainly, but it is only to repay a debt that I have come. Not long ago, after many years of self-reliance and hardship, during which my work was neglected and reviled, even to the point of being burned by a bigoted Dublin printer, there being no other kind of printer available in Dublin, I received £100 from the civil list at the discretion of the Prime Minister,
The Prime Minister.
Mr. Asquith.
I am perfectly well aware who the Prime Minister is. I am the representative of His Majesty's government in Zurich.
The Prime Minister is Mr. Lloyd George, but at the time it was Mr. Asquith.
Oh, yes.
I do not at this moment possess £100, nor was it the intention that I would repay the debt in kind. However, I mentioned the English players. By the fortune of war, Zurich has become the theatrical center of Europe. Here, culture is the continuation of war by other means. Italian opera against French painting, German music against Russian ballet, but nothing from England. Night after night, actors totter about the raked stages of this Alpine Renaissance, speaking in every tongue but one. The tongue of Shakespeare, of Sheridan, of Wilde.
Oh.
The English players intend to mount a repertoire of masterpieces that will show the Swiss who leads the world in dramatic art.
Gilbert and Sullivan! By God!
And also Mr. Joyce's own play, Exiles, which so far, unfortunately...
That's quite by the way.
Patience!
Exactly. First things first.
Trial by jury! Pirates of Penzance!
We intend to start with that quintessential English jewel. The importance of being earnest.
I don't know it. But I've heard of it and I don't like it. It is a play written by an Irish Gomorrahist. Now look here, Janice, I may as well tell you, His Majesty's
I
government...
have come to ask you to play the leading role.
What?
We would be honored and grateful.
What on earth makes you think that I would be qualified to play the lead role in The Importance of Being Earnest?
Oh, it was my suggestion, Henry. You were wonderful goneril at Eton.
Yes, I know, but...
We are short of a good actor to play the lead. He's a witty and articulate English gentleman.
Ernest?
Not Ernest, the other one.
No, I absolutely...
Aristocratic, romantic, epigrammatic. He's a young swell.
A swell?
I may occasionally be a little overdressed, but I make up for it by being immensely overeducated. That gives you the general idea.
How many changes of costume?
2 complete outfits.
Town or country?
First one, then the other.
Indoors or out? Both. Summer or winter?
Summer. But not too hot.
Not raining.
Not a cloud in the sky.
Would he be wearing a bow tie?
It's expressly stipulated.
And he's not in pajamas.
Expressly
Or
prescribed.
it's morning.
Not the other one. Ernest.
Describe the play briefly, omitting all but essential details.
Act 1. The curtain rises, a flat in Mayfair. Tea time. You enter in a bottle green velvet smoking jacket with black frock. Hose white, cravat perfect. Master side trousers. Of your choice. Act 2.
I shall have to make certain expenditures.
A rose garden. After lunch. Some byplay among the small parts. You enter in a debonair garden party outfit. Beribboned boater. A gaily striped blazer. Party-colored shoes and trousers. Of your own choice.
Cream flannel.
Act 3. The morning. A few moments later.
A change of costume.
Possibly by the alteration of a mere line or two of dialogue.
You have brought a copy of the play.
I have it here.
Then let us retire to the next room and peruse it.
That goes £2.
Oh, my dear Phyllis.
Gomorrahist. Silly bugger.
Miss Carr,
Mr. Zara, you're not leaving.
not before I offer you my poem.
Your technique is unusual.
All poetry is a reshuffling of a pack of picture cards, and all poets are cheats. I offer you a Shakespeare sonnet, but it is no longer his. It comes from the wellspring where my atoms are uniquely organized, and my signature is written in the hand of chance.
Which sonnet was it?
The 18th, in English.
Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short to date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair sometime declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of the fair thou owest, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe and eyes can see, so long live this, and this gives life to thee.
Yes, that's the one.
You tear up a These are but wild and whirling words, my lord.
Aye, madam.
Truly I wish the gods had made thee poetical.
I do not know what poetical is. Is it honest in word indeed? Is it a true thing?
Surely he that had made us with such large discourse, looking before and after, gave us not that capability and godlike reason to fuss in us unused.
I was not born under a rhyming planet.
Oh.
Those fellows of infinite tongue that rhyme themselves into ladies' favors, they do reason themselves out again. And that would set my teeth nothing on edge. Nothing so much as mincing poetry.
Thy honesty and love doth mince this matter. Put your bonnet for its right use. Tit for the head. I had rather than 40 shilling, I had my book of songs and sonnets here.
But, since he died and poet better approve, his for his style you'll read, mine for my love.
Darling, shake thou thy gold buds. The untrimmed but short fair shade shines. See this lovely hot possession growest, so long by nature's course, so long heaven!
And decline, summer changing, more temperate complexion.
Oh, pray don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Zara. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain that they mean something else.
I do mean something else, Miss Carr. Ever since I met you, I have admired you.
For me, you've always held an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. As you know, I've been helping Mr. Joyce with his new book, which I'm convinced is a work of genius. Alas, in fashionable society, genius is often regarded as an affront to the ordinary decencies of family life. A girl has few opportunities to meet a man like yourself, who shares her regard for Mr. Joyce as an artist.
I, Gwendolyn?
Did you think, my darling, that I now noticed you at the library? How you gaze at him in admiration, all the way from economics to foreign literature. I elicited by discreet questioning that you two were a poet of the most up-to-date disposition. Oh, I knew I was destined to love you.
Do you really love me, Gwendolyn?
Passionately.
Darling, you don't know how happy you've made me.
My own Tristan.
But you do not mean you couldn't love me if I didn't share your regard for Mr. Joyce as an artist?
But you do.
Yes, I know I do, but supposing...
Rise, sir, from that semi-recumbent posture! Your monocle is in the wrong eye.
I must tell Henry. Here's a chapter from Mr. Joyce's book, which I'm transcribing for him.
But have you come across Dada, darling?
Never done, darling. The chapter we're reading next is comes in the form of the Christian Catechism.
What is the meaning of this?
It has no meaning. It is without meaning as nature is. It is Dada!
Give further examples of Dada.
The zoological gardens after closing time, the logical gardenia. The bankrupt gambler, the successful gambler. The egg board, a sport or pastime for the top 10,000 in which players covered from head to foot in egg yolk leave the field of play.
Are you the inventor of this sport or pastime?
I am not.
What is the name of the inventor?
Art.
By what familiarity, indicating possession and amicability in equal parts, do you habitually refer to him?
My friend, Art.
Alternating with what colloquialism redolent of virtue and longevity?
Good old Art.
From whom did Art receive encouragement and friendship?
From Hugo Ball.
Describe Ball by epithet.
Unspherical. Tall, thin, sacerdotal, German.
Describe him by enumeration of his occupations and his preoccupations.
Novelist, journalist, philosopher, poet, artist, mystic, pacifist, founder of the Cabaret Voltaire and the Marais Bar, #1 Spiegelgasse.
Did Ball keep a diary?
He did.
Was it published?
It was.
Is it in the public domain by the virtue of the expiration of copyright protection, as defined in the Berne Convention of 1886?
It is not.
Quote discriminately from Ball's diary, in such a manner as to avoid forfeiting the goodwill of his executors.
I went to the owner of the Mairai Bar and said, I want to start a nightclub. That same evening, Zara gave a reading of poems conservative in style, which he rather endearingly fished out of the various pockets of his coat.
Is that the coat?
It is.
In what regard is a coat inferior, and in what superior to a hat? Insofar as they are interchangeable in the production of poetry.
Inferior to a hat in regard to the tendency of one or both sleeves to hang down in front of the eyes, with the resultant possibility of the wearer falling off the edge of a platform. Superior to a hat in regard to the number of its pockets.
Amplify discreetly from any contemporary diarist, whose estate is not given to obsessive litigation over trivial infringements of copyright.
On February 26th, Richard Heuselbeck arrived from Berlin, and on March 30th, Herr Tristan Zara was the initiator of a performance, the first in Zurich and in the world, of simultaneous verse, including a poem simultanea of his own composition.
Quote severally your recollections of what was declaimed synchronously.
I began. Boum, boum, boum. I déshabille sa chair qu'on les grenouilles humides commençaient à bouler. Heuselbeck began. Ahoy, ahoy, des Admirals gewirkt des Beinkleid Schneerzer felt. Janko chanted. I hear a whip-poor-will around the hill, and at 5 o'clock when tea is set, I like to have my tea with some brunette. Everybody's doing it. The title of the poem was Admiral Seeks House to Let.
How would you describe this triumph?
As just and proper, well merited, an example of enterprise and charm receiving their due.
What, reduced to their simplest reciprocal form, were Zara's thoughts about Ball's thoughts about Zara, and Zara's thoughts about Ball's thoughts about Zara's thoughts about Ball.
He thought that he knew what he was thinking, whereas he knew that he knew that he knew that he did not. And he did and he didn't.
What did Dada bring to pictorial art, sculpture, poetry, and music that had not been brought to these activities previously in Barcelona, New York, Paris, Rome, and St. Petersburg? By, for example, Paccadia, Duchamp, Satie, Marinetti, and Mayakovsky, who shouts his fractured lines in a yellow blazer with blue roses painted on his cheeks.
The word Dada!
Described sensibly, without self-contradiction, and especially without reference to people stuffing bread rolls up their noses. How the word Dada was discovered.
Tristan Zara discovered the word Dada by accident in a Larousse dictionary. It has been said, and he does not deny, that a paper knife was inserted at random into the book. Heuselbeck recounts how he discovered the word one day in Hugo Ball's dictionary while Zara was not present. Hans Arp, however, has stated, I hereby declare that Tristan Zara discovered the word Dada on February the 8th, 1916 at 6 o'clock in the afternoon.
Were there further disagreements between Zara and Heuselbeck?
There were. As to the meaning and purpose of Dada.
Heuselbeck demanding, for example,
International Revolutionary Union for all artists on the basis of radical communism.
as opposed to Zara's demanding
the right to urinate in different colors.
each person in different colors at different times, or different people in each color all the time. Everybody, multicolored, every time.
It was more to make the point that making poetry should be as natural as making water.
God send you don't make them in the one hat.
By God, you supercilious streak of Irish puke, you four-eyed, bog-ignorant, potato-eating punks! Your art has failed. You've turned literature into a religion, and it's as dead as all the rest. It's an overripe corpse, and you're cutting fancy figures at the wake. It's too late for geniuses. Now, we need vandals and desecrators, simple-minded demolition men, to smash centuries of Baroque subtlety, to bring down the temple, and thus, finally, to reconcile the shame and the necessity of being an artist. Dada! Dada! Dada!
You are an overexcited little man. With a need for self-expression far beyond the scope of your natural gifts. This is not discreditable. Neither does it make you An artist. An artist is the magician, put among men to gratify capriciously their urge for immortality. The temples are built and brought down around him, continuously and contiguously, from Troy to the fields of Flanders. And if there is any meaning in any of it, it is in what survives as art. Yes, even in the celebration of tyrants. Yes, even in the celebration of non-entities. What now of the Trojan War if it had been passed over by the artist's touch? Dust. A forgotten expedition prompted by Greek merchants looking for new markets. A minor redistribution of broken pots, but it is we who stand enriched by a tale of heroes, of a golden apple, a wooden horse, a face that launched 1,000 ships, and above all, of Ulysses, the wanderer, the most human, the most complete of all heroes. Husband, father, son, lover, farmer, soldier, pacifist, politician, inventor, and adventurer. It is a theme so overwhelming that I'm almost afraid to treat it. And yet I, with my Dublin Odyssey, will double that immortality. Yes, by God, there's a corpse that'll dance for some time yet, and leave the world precisely as it finds it. And if you hope to shame it into the grave with your fashionable magic, I would strongly advise you to try to acquire some genius, and if possible, some subtlety before the season is quite over. Top of the morning to you, Mr. Zala.
How are you, my dear? What brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. Eating as usual, I see, my dear Elgin.
Elgin! The other one! Personal triumph for the demanding role of Algernon Moncrief, the Theater zur Kaufleute on Pelikanstrasse, an evening in spring, the English players and that quintessential English jewel, the imprudence of being... Now I've forgotten the first one. By Oscar Wilde. Henry Carr as Elgin. Other parts played by Tristan Rossi and Cecil Palmer, Ethel Turner, Evelyn Carty, and forget the rest. Tickets 5 francs, 4 bob a knob, and every seat filled. Must have made a package for the Irish lout and his cronies. Not one to bear a grudge, however, not after all these years and him dead in the cemetery up the hill. Unpleasant as it is to be dragged to the courts for a few francs. And after I'd paid for my trousers and filled every seat in the house, not very pleasant to be handed 10 francs like a tip, and then him asking me for another 25 francs for tickets. Bloody nerve. Here, I got it out. Besetskeri Zurich, Zurich District Court, in the case of Dr. James Joyce, Dr. My Eye, plaintiff and counter-defendant versus Henry Carr, defendant and counter-plaintiff with reference to the claim for settlement of the following issues. A. Suit. Is defendant and counter-plaintiff, that's me, obliged to pay the plaintiff and counter-defendant, that's him, 25 francs? B. Counter-suit. Is plaintiff and counter-defendant bound to pay defendant and counter-plaintiff 300 francs? Have you got that? Joyce says I owe him 25 francs for tickets. I say Joyce owes me 300 francs for the trousers, etc., purchased by me for my performance as Henry. Or rather, God damn it, the other one! Incidentally, you may or may not have noticed that I got my wires crossed a bit here and there. You know how it is when the old think box gets stuck in a groove, and before you know where you are, you've jumped the points, and suddenly you think, no, steady on, old chap, that was Algernon. Algernon, there you are, all coming back to me now. I've got it straight, I'll be all right from here on. In fact, anyone hanging on just for the cheap comedy of senile confusion might as well go. Because now I'm on to how I met Lenin and could have changed the course of history, etc., etc. Oh, yes. Our Kant has decided that one, de Beklagte, the defendant Henry Carr, is obliged to pay Den Klieger, the plaintiff, James Joyce, 25 francs. The counterclaim of Henry Carr is denied. Carr to indemnify Dr. Joyce 60 francs for trouble and expenses. In other words, a travesty of justice. Later, the other case came up. Oh yes, he sued me for slander, claimed I called him a swindler and a cad. Thrown out of court, naturally. But it was the money with Joyce. Well, it was a long time ago. He left Zurich shortly after the war, went to Paris, stayed there 20 years, then turned up here again, December 1940. Another war. But he was a sick man then, a perforated ulcer, and by January he was dead. They buried him one cold, snowy day in Flanton Cemetery up the hill. I dreamed about him. Dreamed I had him in the witness box. A masterly cross-examination, case practically won. Admitted it all, the whole thing, the trousers, everything. And I flung at him. And what did you do in the Great War? I wrote Ulysses, he said. What did you do? Bloody nerve!
To resume. The war caught Lenin and his wife in Galicia in Austro-Hungary. After a brief internment, they got into Switzerland and settled in Bern. In 1916, needing a better library than the one in Bern, Lenin came to Zurich intending to stay 2 weeks. But he and Nadezhda liked it here and decided to stay. They rented a room in the house of a shoemaker called Kammer at 14 Spiegelgasse. Zurich during the war was a magnet for refugees, exiles, spies, anarchists, artists and radicals of all kinds. Here could be seen James Joyce reshaping the novel into the permanent form of his own monument, the book the world now knows as Ulysses. And here too the Dadaists were performing nightly at the Cabaret Voltaire in the Maierai Bar at number 1 Spiegelgasse, led by a dark, boyish and obscure Romanian poet. Every morning at 9 o'clock, when the library opened, Lenin would arrive. He would stay and work until the lunch hour, when the library closed, then return and work until 6, except on Thursdays, when we remained closed. He was working on his book on imperialism. On January 22nd, 1917, at the Zurich People's House, Lenin told an audience of young people, "We of the older generation may not live to see the decisive battles of the coming revolution." We all believed that this was so. But one day, hardly more than a month later, a Polish comrade, Vronsky, ran into the Ulyanov house with the news that there was a revolution in Russia.
Володя!
Vladimir,
Что такое?
what is it?
Вронский пришел. Он сказал, что в Петербурге революция.
Vronsky came to the house. He says that the revolution in Russia.
Откуда он знает?
How does he know?
Написано в газетах. Он говорит, что царь собирается отречься от престола.
It's all in the papers. He says the Tsar's going to abdicate.
Что ты?
No.
Да,
Yes.
Это в газетах?
Is that in the newspapers?
да, идем домой. Он ждет.
Yes, yes, come on home. He's waiting.
On там.
Is he there?
Да.
Yes.
Газети него.
He brought the paper.
Да.
Yes.
Ти сама видела?
You saw it yourself.
Да, да, да.
Yes, yes, yes.
Иди назад и кажи ему, что я прихожу. Только соберу свои бумаги.
Go home ahead of me. I will collect my papers and follow.
До свидания.
As Nadezhda writes in her Memories of Lenin, from the moment the news of the February Revolution came, Ilyich burned with eagerness to go to Russia. But this was much easier said than done in this landlocked country. Russia was at war with Germany, and Lenin was no friend of the Allied countries. His war policy made him a positive danger to them. Indeed, it was clear that the British and the French would wish to prevent Lenin from leaving Switzerland, and that they would have him watched. Oh. Tristan Zara, da-da-da-da-da.
You must be Cecily.
Shh!
Ah!
And you, I see from your calling card, are Jack's decadent nihilist younger brother.
Oh, I'm not really a decadent nihilist at all, Cecily. You mustn't think that I'm a decadent nihilist.
If you are not, then you have certainly been deceiving us all in a very inexcusable manner. To masquerade as a decadent nihilist, or at any rate to ruminate in different colours and display the results in the Bahnhofstrasse, would be hypocritical.
Oh, of course, I have been rather louche and devil take the hindmost.
I'm glad to hear it.
In fact, now that you mention the subject, I made quite a corner in voluptuous disdain.
You should be so proud of it, however pleasant it may be. You've been a great disappointment to your brother.
Well, my brother has been a great disappointment to me and to Dada. His mother isn't exactly mad about him either. My brother Jack is a booby. And if you want to know why he is a booby, I will tell you why he is a booby. He told me you were rather pretty, whereas you are, at a glance, the prettiest girl in the whole world. Have you got any books one could borrow?
I don't think you ought to talk to me like that during library hours. Seeing as the reference section is about to close for lunch, I will overlook it. Intellectual curiosity is not so common that one can afford to discourage it. What kind of books were you wanting?
Any kind at all.
Is there no limit to the scope of your interest?
It is rather that I wish to increase it. An overly methodical education has left me defend as best I can, with some small knowledge of the aardvark, a mastery of the epicus, and a facility for abstract art. An aardvark, by the way, is a sort of African pig found
I know only too well what an aardvark is, Mr. Zara. To be frank, you strike a sympathetic chord in me.
Politically, I haven't really got beyond anarchism.
I see. Your elder brother, meanwhile?
Bolshevism, and you, I suppose.
Zimmerwaldism.
Oh, Cecily! We will not make it your mission to reform me. We can begin over lunch. It will give me an appetite. Nothing gives me an appetite so much as renouncing my beliefs over a glass of hock.
I'm afraid I'm too busy to reform you today. I must spend the lunch hour preparing references for Lenin.
Some faithful governess seeking fresh pastures.
Far from it. I refer to Vladimir Ilyich, who, with my little help, is writing his book on imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism.
Of course! Lenin! Surely now that revolution has broken out in St. Petersburg, you will be anxious to return home.
That is true. When the history of the revolution, or indeed of anything else, is written, Switzerland is unlikely to loom large in the story. However, all avenues are closed to him. He will have to travel in disguise with false papers. But I fear I've said too much already. Vladimir is positive that there are agents watching him and trying to ingratiate themselves with those close to him. The British are among the most determined, though the least competent. Only the other day, the ambassador received secret instructions to watch the ports.
The ports?
At the same time, the consul in Zurich has received a flurry of cryptic telegrams suggesting intense and dramatic activity. Knock 'em cold, drive 'em wild, break a leg, and one from the ambassador himself, thinking of you tonight, Horace.
I believe I can throw some light on that. The consul has been busy for several weeks in rehearsals which culminated last evening at a performance at the Theater zur Kaufleuten on Pelikanstrasse. I happened to be present.
That would no doubt explain why he virtually left the affairs of the consulate in the hands of his manservant, who fortunately has radical sympathies.
Good heavens.
You seem surprised.
Not at all. I have a servant myself.
I'm afraid that I disapprove of servants.
You are quite right to do so, most of them without scruples.
In the socialist future, no one will have any.
So, I believe, yes. How long did this manservant pass the consul's correspondence?
Your brother Jack? Oh dear, here I go again. You are not a bit like your brother. You are more English.
I assure you I am as Bulgarian as he is.
He's Romanian.
They are the same place. Some call it the one, some the other.
I didn't know that, though I always suspected it.
Now that Ernest is open, no doubt the consul will relieve his servant of diplomatic business. In all fairness, he did have a personal triumph in a most demanding role.
Ernest?
No, the other one.
What do you mean by Ernest?
The importance of being earnest by Oscar Wilde.
Wilde?
You know him?
No, in literature I am only up to G. But I've heard of him. I don't like him. Life is the art, as Vladimir Ilyich always says.
Ars longa vita brevis, Cecily.
Let us leave his proclivities in the decent obscurity of a learned tongue, Mr. Zara. I was referring to the fact that Oscar Wilde was a bourgeois individualist, and so I hear overdressed from habit to boot.
From habit to boot.
And back again.
He may occasionally have been a little overdressed, but he made up for it by being immensely uncommitted.
That is my objection to him. The sole duty and justification for art is social criticism.
That is a most interesting view of the sole duty and justification for art, Cecily. But it has the disadvantage that a great deal of what we call art has no such function, and yet, in some way, gratifies a hunger common to princes and peasants.
In an age in which the difference between prince and peasant was thought to be in the stars, Mr. Zara, art was naturally an affirmation to the one and a consolation to the other. But we live in an age in which the social orders seem to be the work of material forces, and we've been given an entirely new kind of responsibility, the responsibility of changing society.
No, my dear girl. Art does not change society, it is merely changed by...
Art is society. It is one part of many parts all touching each other, from poetry to politics. And until the whole is reformed, artistic decadence, whether in the form of a perfectly phrased epigram or a hatful of words flung in the public's face, is a luxury which only artists can afford.
Kindly not confuse a Dada raffle with Victorian high comedy.
Both bourgeois, both decadent.
You're familiar with neither.
Art is a critique of society, or it is nothing.
Do you know Gilbert and Sullivan?
I know Gilbert, but not Sullivan.
Well, if you knew Ireland like I knew Ireland.
I doubt it. How dare you?
Pirates,
Control yourself. This is a public library,
Yes, madam.
I don't think you ought to talk to me like that during library hours. However, seeing as the reference section is about to close for lunch, I will overlook it. Intellectual curiosity is not so common that one can afford to discourage it. What kind of books were you wanting?
Any kind at all. You choose. I should like you, if you would, to make it your mission to reform me. We can begin over lunch.
I'm afraid I'm too busy to reform you today. You will have to reform yourself. Here's an article which I've been translating for Vladimir Ilyich. You may not be aware, Mr. Zara, that in the governments of Western Europe today, there are 10 socialist ministers.
I admit my work has prevented me from taking an interest in European politics, but 10 is certainly impressive.
It is scandalous. They are supporting an imperialist war. Meanwhile, the real struggle, the class war, is being undermined by these revisionists like Kotsky and MacDonald.
You mean Ramsay MacDonald, Cecily?
I don't mean Flora MacDonald, Mr. Zara.
But he's an absolute bullshit.
He is working within the bourgeois capitalist system and postponing its destruction. Karl Marx has shown that capitalism is digging its own grave.
No, my dear girl. Marx got it wrong. He got it wrong for good reason, but he got it wrong just the same. By bad luck, he encountered the capitalist system in its most deceptive period. The Industrial Revolution had crowded the people in slums and enslaved them in factories, but had not yet begun to bring them the benefits of an industrialized society. Marx drew the lesson that the wealth of the capitalist had been stolen from the worker in the form of unpaid labor. He thought that was how the whole thing worked. That false premise was itself added to a false assumption. Marx assumed that people would behave according to their class, but they didn't. In all kinds of ways and for all kinds of reasons, the classes moved closer together instead of further apart. The critical moment never came, it receded. The tide must have turned about the same time when Das Kapital, after 18 years of hard labour, was finally coming off the press. A moving reminder, Cecily, of the folly of authorship. How sweet you look suddenly. Pink as a rose.
That's because I'm about to puke into your Nancy straw hat! You prig! You swanking, cunting, fop, you bourgeois intellectual hamburger! You artist! Do you think that's what socialism is about? Being allowed to strike, to vote, to buy and not buy, allowed this and that? Do you think it's about winning concessions? Socialism is about ownership. The natural right of the people to the common ownership of their country and its resources. To the land and what is unto the land and what grows on the land and all the profits and benefits. Marx warned us against the liberals, the philanthropists, the piecemeal reformers. Change won't come from them but from a head-on collision. That's how history works. When Lenin was 21, there was a famine in Russia. The intellectuals organized relief. Soup kitchens, seed corn, all kinds of do-gooding with Tolstoy in the lead. Lenin did nothing. He understood that the famine was a force for the revolution. 21 years old in Samara, 1890 to 91. He was a boy, and he understood that. So don't talk to me about superior morality, you patronizing construct prig. All the time you're talking about the classes, you're trying to imagine how I look stripped off to my knickers.
That's a lie.
The only way is the way of Marx and of Lenin, the enemy of all revisionism, opportunist, liberal economism, social chauvinist, bourgeois individualism, quasi-Dadaist paternalism, pseudo-Wildian aphorism, sub-Joycean catechism and dogmatism, excubism, expressionism, rheumatism!
Get them off!
I don't think you ought to talk to me like that during library hours. However, seeing as the reference section is about to close for lunch, I will overlook it. Intellectual curiosity is not so common that one can afford to discourage it. What kind of books were you wanting?
Books? What? Books? What do you mean, Cecily, by books? I have read Mr. Lennon's article and I don't need to read any more. I have come to tell you that you seem to me to be the visible personification of absolute perfection.
In body or mind?
In every way.
Oh, Tristan!
You will love me back and tell me all your secrets, won't you?
You silly boy, of course. I've been waiting for you for months.
For months?
Ever since Jack told me he had a younger brother who was a decadent nihilist. It has been my girlish dream to reform you and to love you.
Oh, Cecily! But my dear Cecily, you don't mean you couldn't love me? Whoa!
From the moment news of the revolution came, Ilyich burned with eagerness to go to Russia. He did not sleep, and at night all sorts of incredible plans were made. But such things could only be thought of in the semi-delirium of the night. A passport of a foreigner from a neutral country would have to be obtained.
Letter to Yakov Ganetsky in Stockholm, March 19th, 1917. I cannot wait any longer. No legal means of transit available. Whatever happens, Zinoviev and I must reach Russia. The only possible plan is as follows. You must find 2 Swedes who resemble Zinoviev and me, but since we cannot speak Swedish, they must be deaf mutes. I enclose our photographs for this purpose.
2 Swedish deaf mutes!
The plan mentioned in this letter was not realized. Letter to V.A. Karpinski in Geneva, the same day, March 19th, 1917.
My dear Vyacheslav Alexeyevich, I'm considering carefully and from every point of view what will be the best way of traveling to Russia. The following is absolutely secret. Please procure in your name papers for traveling to France and England. I will use these when passing through England and Holland to Russia. I can wear a wig. The passport photograph will be of me in a wig. I shall go to the Bern consulate to present your papers, and I shall be wearing the wig. You must disappear from Geneva for at least 2 or 3 weeks until you receive a telegram from me in Scandinavia. Your Lenin. P.S. I write to you because I am convinced that everything between us will remain absolutely secret.
Jack!
Cecily!
I have such a surprise for you. Your brother is here.
What nonsense? I haven't got a brother. Oh my god.
Brother Jack! I have come to tell you that I am sorry for all the embarrassment I have caused you in the past, and that I hope very much that I don't have to embarrass you in the future.
Jack, you are not going to refuse your own brother's hand.
Nothing will induce me to take his hand. He knows perfectly well why.
Jack, if you do not shake hands with your brother,
I'll never forgive you.
Well, then don't forgive me. Why should I care? The fact of the matter is he is no more my... Ah, comrade! Do you know my brother Tristan?
How do you do, comrade? Mrs. Comrade Brown?
This is the last time I shall ever do it.
How pleasant it is to see so perfect a reconciliation. Let us leave the two brothers together.
The plan mentioned in this letter was not realized.
Is a darling. I'm in love with Cecily, which puts me in something of a moral dilemma. I must have a muffin to resolve it. You can have some tea cake.
But I don't like tea cake. Besides, I've sworn never to shake hands with you again.
I don't want you to shake hands with me when I'm eating muffins. Muffins should never be eaten with shaking hands. Bennett. Is there anything in my correspondence that I might share with you and Mr. Zara?
The odds on Len have shortened somewhat, sir, but you can still get 100 to 1 against.
100 to 1.
Put a tenner on for me, would you, Bennett? Running the show by Christmas.
And a tenner for me, Bennett, the dustbin of history.
Yes, sir.
I am shocked, Henry. You are surely not going to let your so-called duty stand in the way of your love for Cecily Carruthers?
I haven't decided. Now still several muffins left.
On the same day, March 19th, there was a meeting of the Russian political emigre groups in Switzerland to discuss ways and means of getting back to Russia. Martov suggested obtaining permits to pass through Germany in exchange for German and Austrian prisoners of war interned in Russia.
March 21st, letter to Karpinski in Geneva. Martov's plan is good, only we cannot deal directly with German authorities.
Therefore, Comrade Grimm, president of the Zimmerwald Committee, undertook the negotiations. March 25th, telegram from the German High Command to the Foreign Ministry in Berlin. No objection to the transit of Russian revolutionaries if effected in special train with reliable escort.
Look, be fair. I adore Cecily, but the Americans about to enter the war, and it's not a good moment for some Bolshevik to pull the Russians out of it. They could turn the whole thing round. I mean, I am on the side of right. Remember, lucky little Poland. Not Poland, the other one.
Our tactics, no trust in and no support of the new government. Kerensky especially suspect. Arming of the proletariat is the only guarantee. Telegraph this to St. Petersburg.
Mind you, according to Marx, the dialectic of history will get you to much the same place with or without Lenin. If Lenin did not exist, it would be unnecessary to invent him. Or Marx, for that matter.
Telegram to Gonetsky in Stockholm. 20 of us are leaving tomorrow.
Furthermore, your Marxism is sheer pretension. You're an amiable bourgeois with a cheat from matron, and if the revolution came, you wouldn't know what hit you. You're nothing. You're an artist. And multicolored micturition is no trick to these boys. They'll have you pissing blood.
Artists and intellectuals will be the conscience of the revolution. It is perfectly heartless of you to eat all the muffins and leave me with tea cakes.
On April 9th at 2:30 in the afternoon, the travelers set off from the Zaringerhof restaurant in true Russian style, loaded with pillows, blankets, and a few personal belongings. Ilyich wore a bowler hat, a heavy overcoat, and the thick-soled hobnailed boots that had been made for him by the cobbler Kammerer at number 14 Spiegelgasse. Telegram to his sister in St. Petersburg.
Arriving Monday night, 11. Tell Pravda.
Well, do what you will. To a Dadaist, history comes out of a hat too.
I don't think there'll be a place for Dada in a communist society.
That's what we have against this one. There's a place for us in it.
The train left at 3:10, on time.
No! It is perfectly clear in my mind. It must be stopped. I shall telegraph the minister in Bern as soon as I've had the last muffin.
must become party literature. Down with non-partisan literature. Down with literary supermen. Literature must become a part of the common cause of the proletariat, a cog in the social democratic mechanism. Publishing and distributing centers, bookshops and reading rooms, libraries and similar establishments must all be under party control. We want to establish, and we shall establish, a free press. Free not simply from the police, but also from capital, from careerism, and what is more, free from bourgeois anarchist individualism. Everyone is free to write and say whatever he likes, without any restrictions. But every voluntary association, including the party, is also free to expel members who use the name of the party to advocate anti-party views. Secondly, we must say to you bourgeois individualists that your talk of absolute freedom is sheer hypocrisy. There can be no real and effective freedom in a society based on the power of money. Socialist literature and art will be free because the idea of socialism and sympathy with the working people, not greed and careerism, will bring ever new forces to its ranks!
And a lot more like that. Sorry about the muffins business, by the way. Did you notice? Of course you did. Hello, you thought? He's doing it again. Right, well, never mind. Here's the picture. Lenin in St. Petersburg, yours truly holding the empty bag. I got pretty close to him, had a stroke of luck with a certain little lady, and got a pretty good idea of his intentions. In fact, I might have stopped the whole Bolshevik thing in its tracks, but here's the point. I was torn. On the one hand, the future of the civilized world. On the other hand, my feelings for Cecily. And don't forget, he wasn't Lenin then. I mean, who was he, as it were? Well, yes. Lenin on literature and art.
Ilyich wrote very little about art and literature generally, but he enjoyed it. We sometimes went to concerts in the theater, even the music hall. He laughed a lot at the clowns. And he was moved to tears when we saw La Dame aux Camélias in London in 1907.
La Dame aux Camélias?
Ilyich admired Tolstoy, especially War and Peace, but, as he put it in an article in 1908 on Tolstoy's 80th birthday,
on the one hand, we have the great artist. On the other hand, we have the landlord obsessed with Christ. On the one hand, the strong and sincere protester against social injustice. And on the other hand, the jaded, hysterical sniveler known as the Russian intellectual.
However, he respected Tolstoy's traditional values. The new art seemed somehow alien and incomprehensible to him. Clara Zetkin, in her memoirs, remembers him bursting out,
"Bosh and nonsense! We are good revolutionaries, but we seem to be somehow obliged to keep up with modern art. Well, as for me, I'm a barbarian. Expressionism, futurism, cubism, I don't understand them and I get no pleasure from them."
That's my point. There was nothing wrong with Lenin except his politics.
Once in 1919, we went to a concert in the Kremlin, and an actress started declaiming something by Mayakovsky. Mayakovsky was celebrated even before the revolution, when he used to shout his fractured lines in a yellow blazer with blue roses painted on his cheeks. Ilyich was in the front row, and he nearly jumped out of his skin.
Memo to A.V. Lunacharsky, Commissar for Education. Aren't you ashamed for printing 5,000 copies of Mayakovsky's new book? It is nonsense, stupidity, double-dyed stupidity and affectation.
In other words, a cheat from matron.
Mayakovsky should be whipped for his futurism.
Mayakovsky shot himself in 1930. Zara got fat and died in Paris in 1963. With modern art, you see, you have to pick your time and place.
I remembered when we were in London in 1903 how Ilyich longed to go to the Moscow Arts Theatre to see the lower depths. We did so after the revolution. Well, the overacting irritated him. After seeing the lower depths, he avoided the theatre for a long time. But once we went to see Uncle Vanya, which he liked very much. And finally, the last time we went to the theatre, in 1922, we saw a stage version of Charles Dickens's Cricket on the Hearth. After the first act, Ilyich found it dull. The saccharine sentimentality got on his nerves, and during the conversation between the old toymaker and his blind daughter, he could stand it no longer, and we left.
Yes, I would have enjoyed a crack with old Vladimir Ilyich, talking about art and literature in the cafes, strolling along the Bahnhofstrasse discussing Tolstoy and the other one. Wasn't the same with Zara and Joyce. Never hit it off with them, never saw eye to eye, but then England died. If only I'd known. But he had a train to catch, and then it was too late. Pity.
But I remembered him one evening at a friend's house in Moscow, listening to a Beethoven sonata.
I don't know of anything greater than the Appassionata. Amazing, superhuman music. It always makes me feel, perhaps naively, it makes me feel proud of the miracles that human beings can perform. But I can't listen to music often. It affects my nerves. Makes me want to say nice, stupid things and pat the heads of those people who, while living in this vile hell, can create such beauty. Nowadays, we can't pat heads, or we'll get our hands bitten off. We've got to hit heads! Hit them without mercy! Although, ideally, we're against doing violence to people. One's duty is infernally hard.
Once, when Vladimir was in prison in St. Petersburg, he wrote to me and asked that at certain times of day I should go and stand in a particular square of pavement on the Shpalernia. When the prisoners were taken out for exercise, it was possible, through one of the windows in the corridor, to catch a momentary glimpse of this spot. I went for several days and stood a long while on the pavement there. But he never saw me. Something went wrong. I forget what.
Now be absolutely frank, is there trouble at the bank?
At the library, Gwendolyn.
At the library, Cecily.
Gwendolyn. I dread to state the reason for my call. The fact is there's a fee due on Homer's Odyssey and the Irish Times for June 1904.
Oh, Cecily, oh, Cecily, a friend of mine is writing Ulysses. I'm sure he never knew that the books were overdue.
Since October, Gwendolyn.
On my ticket, Cecily, oh, Cecily, oh, Cecily. Aren't you the girl who has that Russian friend? I pass him every day by economics A to K.
It's never going to be the same again.
Absolutely, Cecily.
Positively, Gwendolyn, Gwendolyn, Gwendolyn. The library is going to seem so sad. Apart from Mr. Zara, all the Bolsheviki are aboard that special choo-choo bound for Petrograd.
Excuse me, Cecily. Oh, Cecily. This Mr. Zara, does he spell it with a T? T-Z-A-R-A, a Bolshevik, you say?
Absolutely, Gwendolyn.
You surprise me, Cecily. Oh, Cecily. Oh, Cecily. I must admit you've taken me aback. I shall certainly insist on a tete with Tristan.
With Tristan, no, I mean his brother Jack. Oh, Gwendolyn, Gwendolyn. Tristan's quite another thing again.
Brother Jack is news to
They
me.
kept it in the family.
Relatively, Cecily.
Eminently, Gwendolyn, Gwendolyn, Gwendolyn. I'd like you to be the first to know. Tristan's hanging up his hat for the proletariat. We have an understanding.
Just a moment, Cecily. Oh, Cecily. Oh, Cecily. Tristan's understanding is with me. What he writes or draws is no concern of yours.
Relatively, Gwendolyn.
Absolutely, Cecily. Oh, Cecily. Oh, Cecily. You have made an unfortunate mistake. Forgive me if I say Tristan mentioned yesterday he delectates his art for its own sake.
Oh, Gwendolyn. Oh, Gwendolyn. Clearly he has changed his mind. No longer in the arts, accepting Cecily as a means towards an end.
Cecily, oh Cecily, to say this gives me physical distress. But one of Joyce's chapters sent Tristan into raptures on the subject of the stream of consciousness.
Oh, Gwendolyn, oh, Gwendolyn. It harrows me to contradict a friend, but his consciousness of class is the one that's going to last.
Lower middle, Cecily,
Are you really, Gwendolyn?
Miss Carruthers.
Miss Carr?
I do not wish to trespass on your time.
I hope that I will see you at the library should you ever get around to pay your fine. Miss Carr.
Miss Carruthers, is it done to wish you luck with all the others? I'm not awfully au fait with manners down your way.
And I'm yours, Miss Carr. Tristan!
That's my brother.
Your brother?
Yes, my brother Henry Carr.
Do you mean that he is not Tristan Zara, the artist?
Quite the contrary. He's the British consul.
Mr. Zara. Ah!
Tristan, my Tristan.
Comrade Jack!
Comrade Jack.
Yes, that gentleman is a luminary of the Zimmerwald left.
Are they Bolsheviks?
Well, they dine with us.
Oh, a gross deception has been practiced upon us. My poor wounded Cecily.
My sweet wronged Gwendolyn.
Oh.
There is just one question I should like to ask Mr. Carr.
An admirable idea. Mr. Zara, there's one question I should like to put to you.
What, in truth, was your opinion of the essay I gave you to read?
What indeed did you think of the chapter I showed you?
Very well written, interesting style.
Very well read. Rich material.
But as a social critique.
But it's art for art's sake.
Rubbish! He's a madman.
Bilge, it's unreadable.
Hypocrites!
I'm sorry. 'Twas for love.
For love?
That's true. Yes, it is.
But our intellectual differences are an insuperable barrier.
By the way, I hear that Bennett has been showing you my private correspondence.
He has radical sympathies.
There is no one so radical as a manservant whose freedom of the champagne bin has been interfered with.
So I believe.
Well, I put a stop to it.
Given him notice.
Given him more champagne.
We Romanians have much to learn from the English.
I expect to be missing Sophia.
You mean Gwendolyn?
Bucharest.
Ah, yes. Yes, the Paris of the Balkans.
Silly place to put it, really. Is this the Perrier-Jouet, Brew, 89?
No, sir.
All gone!
I'm afraid so, sir.
Very well, Bennett.
I've put the newspapers and telegrams on the sideboard, sir.
Anything of interest?
The Neue Zürcher Zeitung and the Zeitung Post announced respectively the cultural high and low points of the theatrical season at the Theater Zürcher yesterday evening. The Zeitung sings you out for a personal triumph in a demanding role. The minister telegraphs his congratulations and also thanks you for your telegram to him. He urges you to prevent Mr. Leonov from leaving Switzerland at all costs.
Irish lout!
Russian.
No! What's his name? Deirdre.
Bridget.
Joyce! Lout! Quadrioculate Irish git! Came round to the dressing room and handed me 10 francs like a tip. Bloody nerve! Sponger!
Mr. Joyce, where is your sister?
Her money is in trust.
I have only one request to make of you.
And I have only one request to make of you! Why, for God's sakes, can you not contrive, just once, to wear the jacket that is suggested by your trousers?
If I could do it once, I could do it every time. My wardrobe got out of step in Trieste, and its reciprocal members pass each other endlessly in the night. Now, could you let me have the 25 francs?
What 25 francs?
You were given 8 tickets to sell at 5 francs per ticket. My books indicate that only 15 francs has been received from you.
I have spent 350 francs of my own money so that your off-the-peg production should boast one character who looked as if he was acquainted with a tailor. If you want a further 25 francs out of me, you shall have to drag me through the courts. You are a swindler and a cad.
Furthermore, your book has much in common with your dress. As an arrangement of words, it is graceless without being random. As a narrative, it lacks charm or even vulgarity. As an experience, it is like sharing a cell with a fanatic in search of a mania.
Who gave you this manuscript to read?
I did.
Miss Carr, did I or did I not give you to type a chapter in which Mr. Bloom's adventures correspond to the Homeric episode of the Oxen of the Sun?
You did, and it was wonderful.
Then why do you return to me an ill-tempered thesis purporting to prove, amongst other things, that Ramsay MacDonald is a lick-spittle bourgeois gentleman's gentleman? Miss Carr, where is the missing chapter?
Excuse me, did you say Bloom?
I did.
And is it a chapter inordinate in length and erratic in style, remotely connected with midwifery?
It is a chapter which, by a miracle of compression, uses the gamut of English literature, from Chaucer to Carlyle, to describe events taking place in a lying-in hospital in Dublin.
It is obviously the same work. Sisters!
Though there was a court case, I admit. And your trousers came into it, I don't deny. You never got close to Vladimir Ilyich, and I don't remember the other one. I do remember Joyce. Yes, you are quite right. And he was Irish, with glasses. But that was the year after, 1918, and the train had long gone from the station. I waved a red hanky and cried, "Long live the revolution," as the carriage took him away in his bowler hat. And yes, I said yes when you asked me. But he was the leader of millions by the time you did your Algernon.
Algernon. That was him.
I said that was the year after.
After what?
You never even saw Lenin.
Yes, I did. Saw him in the cafes. Knew them all. Part of the job.
And you were never the consul.
Never said I was.
Yes, you did.
Should we have a cup of tea?
Consul was Percy somebody.
Bennett.
What?
I said the consul's name was Bennett.
Oh, yes, Bennett. That's another thing.
Are we going to have a cup of tea or not?
And I never helped him write Imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. That was the year before, too. 1916.
Oh, Cicely. I wish I'd known then that you'd turn out to be a pedant. Wasn't this, didn't do that, 1916, 1917? What of it? I was here. They were here. They went on. I went on. We all went on.
No, we didn't. We stayed. Sophia married that artist. I married you. You played Algernon. They all went on.
Great day. Was Yorick during the war? Refugees, spies, exiles, painters, poets, writers, radicals of all kinds. I knew them all. Used to argue far into the night. At the Odeon, the Terrace. I learned 3 things in Zurich during the war. I wrote them down. Firstly, you're either a revolutionary or you're not. And if you're not, you might as well be an artist as anything else. Secondly, if you can't be an artist, you might as well be a revolutionary. I forget the third thing.